This section will serve as the gentle doorway into the entire experience, paced slowly and designed to set the listener into a restful state. The narration begins with a soft, almost whisper-like invitation for the audience to settle in for the night, perhaps lying down in bed or reclining comfortably. The voice encourages them to let the outside world fade away and prepare to embark on a calm journey through myth and history. The rhythm of the words will be intentionally slow and melodic, with subtle repetition that creates a lull, helping the mind transition from alertness to ease. Instead of diving immediately into Loki or Norse mythology, this section functions like a soft curtain rising, creating atmosphere, establishing trust, and signaling that this is not a hurried lecture, but rather a bedtime tale meant to be absorbed as much in feeling as in thought. The opening imagery will gently paint a picture of night itself, describing the dimming of lamps, the way shadows stretch long, the sound of a breeze, or perhaps imagined ocean waves. These elements will evoke the sensory environment of calmness, guiding the listener to close their eyes if they wish, and reminding them that they do not need to stay awake or strain to remember every detail. The story will still be here when they drift off. The narrator can acknowledge that history and mythology are often told in exciting or even dramatic ways. But here, the story will unfold as if beside a quiet fire, where each detail drifts like smoke into the night air. Once the physical sense of stillness is established, the section can ease into the promise of the narrative itself. A long exploration of Loki, the trickster of Norse mythology, told slowly and richly over many chapters. The listener is assured that the story will weave through origins, family, mischief, betrayals, and the final great battle of Ragnarok, but not in a rushed or heavy way. Instead, it will be told as if time stretches endlessly, with each moment savored. This reassurance calms the restless mind by removing urgency, promising that the pace will be steady and soothing, like the flow of a river. The section should also include gentle reminders of breath and presence. The narrator might guide the listener to take slow inhales and exhales, not as a meditation practice per se, but as a natural rhythm that matches the storytelling cadence. A sense of timelessness should be cultivated, so that the audience feels they can let go of their day, their obligations, their worries, and simply let the myth unfold as a companion to their dreams. This creates a psychological safety net. The myth is there to hold them, not demand anything of them. In this introduction, there is space to acknowledge the strange, fascinating quality of myths themselves. They are stories older than memory, passed down through generations, carrying whispers of ancient people who once told them around fires under starlit skies. The narrator can softly muse on how these stories may have helped people of the past fall asleep themselves after long days of work, listening to elders spin tales of gods, giants, and tricksters. By connecting the modern listener to this ancient human rhythm, the section creates a sense of belonging. The listener is part of something timeless, sharing in the universal ritual of storytelling before sleep. The tone should be intentionally circular, looping back gently to themes introduced earlier, so that the listener feels cradled rather than led in a straight line. For instance, after painting the image of Norse firesides, the narrator may return to the idea of the listener's own resting space, comparing the flicker of candlelight in the past to the dim light in the listener's room now. This creates a soft mirror effect between the old world and the present, weaving history into the act of relaxation. As the section approaches its end, it should carefully prepare for the transition into the mythology proper. Loki will be named, but not yet explored in detail. The narrator can tease the idea that Loki is not a simple character, not easily described, and that the coming chapters will wander through his strange and complicated tales. This creates curiosity while still maintaining a slow, dreamlike pace. Rather than launching into excitement, the section closes with an almost lullaby-like rhythm, assuring the listener that everything is unfolding in its time. The final sentences of this section should gently lower energy further, leaning into imagery of quietness. The hush of snow falling in a northern forest, the steady crackle of a fire, the endless stars above ancient travelers. The listener is reminded once more that whether they stay awake to follow the full journey or drift off into dreams, the story will carry them. The words themselves will become part of the background of rest, wrapping around the mind like a blanket. With this sense of comfort established, the path opens into the broader mythological landscape of the next section, where the stage of Norse cosmology will begin to unfold. This section unfolds like the drawing of curtains to reveal an immense backdrop, the mythological world of the Norse. The tone remains slow and soothing, painting pictures rather than giving lists, so that the audience can feel themselves stepping into an ancient landscape without hurry. Where Section 1 welcomed the listener into rest, this chapter gently establishes the stage where Loki's stories will eventually play out. It is a place that is both vast and intimate, cold and warm, echoing with mysteries yet softened here into a bedtime atmosphere. The narration will begin by describing the northern world itself. Long winters, pale skies stretched across endless horizons, seas that crash against rocky cliffs, and deep fjords carved by time. The sound of water and the image of snow-dusted forests create a rhythm of stillness and vastness, preparing the imagination to travel far back in time. The land is introduced not as a harsh reality, but as a dreamlike realm, one where gods and giants were imagined to walk, shaping the destinies of mortals and the cosmos. The storytelling voice should linger on details like the glow of the aurora shimmering across the night sky, or the quiet of a frozen lake beneath a full moon, letting each image stretch and linger like a lull in conversation. From here, the outline shifts gently into the structure of Norse cosmology. Instead of a dry explanation of Yggdrasil, the world tree, the story will present it as a vast, living presence that holds together 9 realms. Each realm will be described in a soft, atmospheric way. Asgard, shining above, home of the gods. Midgard, the middle world of humans, cradled and protected. Jotunheim, the rugged land of giants. And others like Alfheim, Vanaheim, and Niflheim. The goal is not to overwhelm the listener with too much structure, but to sketch just enough of the mythic geography that they can picture Loki and the gods moving within it. This is less about memorization and more about sinking into an imaginative dreamscape. The gods themselves will be introduced as a cast of characters, but done so gently, one by one, like meeting figures in a dream. Odin, with his single eye and endless wisdom, seated upon his high throne with ravens whispering secrets in his ears. Thor, strong and protective, with his hammer Mjolnir crackling with thunder. Freya, radiant with beauty and mystery, traveling in a chariot pulled by cats. Each description will be brief, yet evocative, focusing on the atmosphere and imagery rather than exhaustive detail. The tone should remain calm, letting each character drift into the listener's mind as a soft impression rather than a sharp definition. Throughout this section, there should also be a sense of timelessness, the idea that myths are not linear history, but rather cyclical stories, half-remembered and retold across centuries. The narrator may muse on how these myths were once told in longhouses, by firelight, to people who relied on them not only for entertainment, but for meaning. By placing the listener in that imagined longhouse, lying in the warm glow while snow falls outside, the section makes the mythology itself feel like part of the bedtime ritual. The pacing will continue to loop between large cosmic imagery and small sensory detail. After describing realms or gods, the narration might return to the sound of crackling firewood, the softness of fur blankets, the smell of pine and smoke. These recurring images anchor the grandeur of mythology into a soothing, tactile rhythm, reminding the listener that the story is not about memorizing pantheons, but about sinking into a mood. The gods and myths become part of the background hum of sleep, just as in ancient times they may have been woven into the background of life. The section will also lightly acknowledge that Norse myths are often told in violent or dramatic terms. Wars between gods and giants, struggles of fate and destiny, prophecies of doom. But here, the narration reframes them as part of a dreamscape, softened at the edges like memories seen through twilight. The listener is reminded that while chaos and battle exist in these stories, in this retelling they will be like passing clouds rather than storms, serving the purpose of atmosphere rather than tension. As the section nears its close, Loki is again gently foreshadowed. The narrator may hint that while Odin rules and Thor protects, there is always another figure nearby, A sly smile in the shadows, a whisper of laughter where none should be, a shifting form darting between roles. Loki is not introduced fully yet, but left as a suggestion within the mythological landscape, the spark of unpredictability that will soon take center stage. This helps maintain curiosity and contrast, keeping the flow both restful and engaging. The final moments of this section return to quiet imagery. The listener is reminded of the immense world tree, its branches stretching across realms, roots dipping into darkness, trunk holding up the stars. They are invited to imagine themselves drifting within this great tree's shelter, safe and steady, while stories move around them like breezes in the leaves. With this image established, the transition to the next section, an introduction to Loki himself, becomes seamless, as if the camera slowly pans from the great tree to a single figure standing beneath its boughs, waiting with a mischievous glint in his eye. This section begins by softly narrowing the focus from the vast mythological landscape introduced earlier to a single figure who seems to stand apart from it all. The listener has already glimpsed Odin's wisdom, Thor's strength, and Freya's radiance, but now attention drifts to Loki, a character whose presence feels both essential and unsettling. The narration describes him not with rigid definitions, but with gentle, contrasting impressions, letting him take shape slowly, like a shadow forming at the edge of a fire. The voice should remain soft, leaning into curiosity rather than judgment, so that the listener feels drawn closer to this strange figure. Loki is introduced as a being of contradictions. He is counted among the Aesir, the gods of Asgard, yet his bloodline ties him to the giants, the eternal rivals of those gods. He is neither fully one nor the other, walking a line between loyalty and betrayal. This dual nature becomes a soft refrain, reminding the listener that Loki resists categories. Where Odin has purpose and Thor has duty, Loki has ambiguity. The outline calls for these contrasts to be described slowly, almost like waves coming to shore, repeating the theme of in-betweenness until it settles into the listener's imagination. The narrator then offers a calm reflection on Loki's appearance. Unlike Thor, who is imagined with strength, or Odin, who is marked by wisdom, Loki is described through slipperiness and change. Some stories depict him as handsome and quick, others as sly and sharp-featured, but above all he is the one who cannot be pinned down. His face might hold a smile that can mean comfort one moment and danger the next. The description should be visual but dreamlike, encouraging the listener to imagine Loki without settling on any single form, for he is as shifting as smoke. From here, the outline turns to his personality as first impressions would have been felt by the gods themselves. To some, Loki is a companion, bringing clever solutions when no one else can think of a way forward. To others, he is a nuisance, meddling where he is not wanted, stirring trouble for the sheer delight of watching others scramble. His wit is sharp, his tongue quicker than a blade, and his humor often masks cruelty. Yet he is also the one who saves the gods from disaster, who dares risks that others avoid. These dual impressions are set side by side, so the audience can feel the tension. Loki is both friend and foe, both rescuer and saboteur. The narration gently acknowledges that in most traditions, gods are painted in clear lines of good and evil, yet Loki resists this simplicity. He is not evil in the sense of a pure villain, nor is he heroic in the sense of a savior. Instead, he occupies the liminal space, where he serves as the unpredictable current in an otherwise orderly sea. This observation is presented slowly, with pauses, encouraging the listener to reflect on how every community and every story has figures who do not fit, who challenge boundaries. The calm, reflective tone keeps this from becoming lecture-like. Instead, it feels like an invitation to drift into thought. At this stage, the outline allows for gentle foreshadowing of Loki's role in myths to come. The narrator might say that, in time, the listener will hear of how Loki brings disaster and how he brings rescue, how he is loved and hated in equal measure. The point here is not to rush into those tales, but to set the expectation that Loki's contradictions will echo again and again, threading through every story that follows. This creates anticipation without urgency, a soft pull toward what is coming next. The section also leaves space for reflection on why such a character might exist in mythology at all. In a calm, almost meditative aside, the narrator can muse that human beings have always been fascinated by tricksters, figures who disrupt, who blur lines, who reveal truths through chaos. Loki is the Norse expression of that fascination, embodying the human recognition that not everything in life is clear, orderly, or predictable. This idea should be delivered in a voice that feels thoughtful rather than analytical, offering the listener not a lecture but a gentle wondering. Toward the end of the section, Loki is placed in contrast with the gods around him. Where Thor is direct and physical, Loki is subtle and verbal. Where Odin is strategic and contemplative, Loki is impulsive and immediate. Where Balder shines with beauty and purity, Loki lurks with shadow and irony. By laying these figures side by side, the narration helps the audience see Loki not just in isolation but as a presence defined by difference, always against the backdrop of others. The closing of this section should return to imagery, softening the impression of Loki so that it lingers but does not sharpen into clarity. The narrator might describe him as a figure standing at the edge of Asgard's golden hall, half in the light of the fire, half in shadow, smiling as though he knows something no one else does. The image should be left unresolved, a mystery the listener can carry with them. With this, the section naturally transitions toward the next, where Loki's origins and family ties will be explored more deeply, pulling the listener further into the web of his complicated story. This section gently opens with the idea that every figure in mythology carries not just their own story, but the echoes of their family, their ancestry, and the bonds they make across worlds. For Loki, those connections are as complicated as his character itself, a weaving of bloodlines, marriages, and children that set him apart from the other gods of Asgard. The narration begins slowly, describing how in Norse tradition, the question of where someone comes from often explains their role in the larger cosmos. Just as Odin descends from a line of gods and giants that mark him as king, and Thor is tied to divine strength through his lineage, Loki's ancestry makes him a being of division and tension. The outline first brings the listener to Loki's birth. His father, Farbodi, is a giant whose name can be translated as cruel striker, associated with fire or lightning. His mother, Laufey, whose name means leafy or tree island, connects to the natural, softer imagery of earth or forest. In the gentle cadence of the narration, these parents seem less like historical figures and more like elemental forces, fire meeting leaf, destruction brushing against fragility. Loki, as their son, embodies this tension, born of opposites, shaped from contrasts. The narration lingers here, repeating the imagery slowly, as though letting the listener drift between fire and leaf, chaos and delicacy, to understand the dreamlike balance that defines Loki's essence. The section then carefully shifts to explain Loki's place among the gods. Though his blood is giant-born, he is often found in Asgard, walking among Odin and the Aesir. This dual belonging is described softly as both a bridge and a fracture. He is accepted as companion and confidant to the gods, yet never fully trusted. The outline suggests a calm reflection here, drawing parallels to how every group has outsiders, those who belong and yet do not. The narrator's tone should remain inclusive and soothing, as though recognizing that Loki's story reflects something deeply human, the tension of being part of a family while always being slightly apart. From ancestry, the section gently flows into Loki's unions and his own children, whose identities stretch the imagination into strange and haunting forms. The narration introduces his wife Sigyn, a figure of loyalty and sorrow. In myth, she becomes known as the one who holds a bowl to catch the venom dripping onto Loki's face during his punishment. In this section, though, her role is introduced softly, as a quiet presence by his side, a reminder that even in chaos, love and devotion can take root. The audience is encouraged to picture Sigyn as calm and steadfast, her devotion like a flame that does not flicker, even as Loki himself shifts and wanders. Then comes Angerboda, another of Loki's partners, a giantess from Jotunheim, whose name means she who brings sorrow. With her, Loki fathers three of the most unsettling beings in Norse myth: Fenrir the wolf, Jormungandr the serpent, and Hel, the ruler of the underworld. Each child is introduced slowly, almost ceremonially, with imagery that soothes rather than frightens. Fenrir is imagined as a vast wolf, his paws shaking the earth, his gaze fierce yet mournful. Jormungandr is described as a serpent coiled beneath the ocean, so large that he encircles the world, a silent presence beneath the waves. Hel is introduced as the quiet ruler of shadows, half her face living, half her face dead, presiding with calm inevitability over those who pass away. The narration makes these beings feel dreamlike rather than monstrous, like archetypes of fear and inevitability softened by bedtime tone. The section pauses to reflect on how these children reveal Loki's role in the greater mythic cycle. They are not simply monsters but portents, tied directly to the unfolding of Ragnarok, the end of days. This is delivered in a slow, contemplative way, letting the listener feel that Loki's family ties reach far beyond personal relationships. They ripple into the very destiny of gods and worlds. Each bond Loki makes creates consequences, not just for himself but for the cosmos, a reminder that even in myth, connections shape destiny. The outline then turns briefly to Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse, born of one of Loki's more unusual shape-shifting adventures. Here the narration softens into humor, describing how Loki, transformed into a mare, gave birth to Odin's mighty steed. This strange tale, told gently, adds a dreamlike, almost playful quality to the family portrait, showing that Loki's bonds are not always dark or sorrowful, but sometimes bizarre and wondrous. The shift in tone provides contrast, keeping the listener's attention without breaking the restful mood. As the section draws toward its close, the narrator circles back to reflect on how Loki's origins and family ties mark him as deeply entangled in every corner of Norse mythology. Unlike other gods, whose family roles are clear, Odin as father, Thor as son, Freya as goddess of love, Loki's ties sprawl unpredictably, connecting him to giants, gods, monsters, and myths of the end times. The listener is invited to imagine Loki standing at the center of a great web, each thread leading to a different being, some beautiful, some terrible, all part of him. The section ends with a soft foreshadowing of what is to come. Having traced Loki's ancestry and family, the next step will be to explore not just who he is connected to, but how he acts. The mischief, the trickery, the clever disruptions that make him unforgettable. The listener is encouraged to rest in the image of Loki's family tree, sprawling with unlikely branches, before drifting onward into the tales of his trickster nature. This section gently shifts the story from Loki's ancestry and family ties into the essence of his character, his role as a trickster. The narration begins softly by asking the listener to imagine that every culture across the world seems to carry within its stories a figure of mischief, someone who bends rules, plays jokes, and unsettles the powerful. These figures can be unsettling, yet they are also endlessly fascinating, because they show what happens when order meets chaos. The tone remains calm and unhurried, framing this exploration not as an academic comparison, but as a dreamy, global journey through myth. The narration lingers first on the idea of mischief itself. Mischief can be lighthearted, like a playful prank between friends, or it can turn sharp, bringing pain and destruction. Loki embodies both ends of this spectrum. He is the god who can save his companions with a clever plan one moment, and the one who causes catastrophe the next. The outline calls for these ideas to be introduced in looping, rhythmic sentences, giving the audience time to feel the contrast without needing to resolve it. To deepen this theme, the section introduces other trickster figures across the world, spoken of as if they, too, were drifting into the longhouse to sit by the fire. From North America comes Coyote, playful and unpredictable, whose cleverness often turns against him. From West Africa comes Anansi the spider, spinning webs of deceit and wisdom alike, sometimes bringing fortune, sometimes misfortune. From Greek mythology comes Hermes, a god of boundaries, known for stealing Apollo's cattle as a newborn, yet later becoming a messenger of the gods. Each figure is described slowly and softly, not in encyclopedic detail, but as dreamlike visitors from other traditions. The goal is to show that Loki is part of a broader archetype, a role that humans have always seemed to create in their storytelling. Once these comparisons are lightly woven, the focus returns to Loki. Unlike some tricksters who remain playful or relatively harmless, Loki drifts more and more toward danger. He is not simply the clown or jester, though he has those qualities. He is also the one who brings tragedy. The narration should carefully highlight this distinction without rushing into darker tales yet, letting the listener feel that Loki sits at a threshold where humor can slide into harm. The section then gently reflects on why tricksters exist at all. Human beings, the narration suggests, live within rules, customs, and expectations. Yet, in stories, there always appears a figure who breaks those rules, who tests boundaries, who questions authority. This can be frightening, but it is also freeing, because tricksters show what happens when the rigid order of the world is shaken. Delivered in a calm, meditative rhythm, this reflection invites the listener to drift into thought without needing answers. Next, the section softens into smaller anecdotes of Loki's mischief, not yet the great tragedies, but the lighter moments. Stories of him stirring trouble in Asgard's feasts, of disguises and jokes, of sly words that turn arguments upside down. These are presented with a playful but still soothing tone, more like bedtime riddles than sharp tricks. The narration should let these images come and go like flickering sparks, giving the audience glimpses of Loki's humor before moving on. From here, the outline allows space for gentle contrast. The listener is reminded that while mischief can bring laughter, it also holds risk. The same cleverness that rescues the gods in one tale may doom them in another. The narration should loop back to this tension, reinforcing that Loki's role is not simple, and that tricksters across cultures often walk this line. Just as Coyote is sometimes celebrated and sometimes punished, and Hermes both deceives and helps, so too does Loki shift between saving and destroying. Toward the end, the section broadens again into quiet reflection. The narrator may muse that perhaps people told stories of tricksters as a way to prepare for life's unpredictability. Just as no day goes exactly as planned, no harvest is guaranteed, and no journey is without surprises, the trickster stands as a reminder of uncertainty. But instead of presenting this as frightening, the narration frames it as a natural part of existence, something to be accepted, like changing weather or shifting seasons. The closing of the section brings the listener back to Loki, leaving him half-defined, still mysterious. He is not yet condemned, nor fully celebrated. He is the in-between figure, the one who will appear again and again, sometimes as savior, sometimes as destroyer. The narration should end on a soft image, perhaps of Loki smiling slyly at the edge of a fire, tossing a spark into the air, a spark that could either fade into darkness or set the night ablaze. This prepares the way for the next section, where one of Loki's first great acts of mischief, the theft of Idun's apples, will be retold in detail. This section begins by setting a peaceful, dreamlike scene. The gods of Asgard in their shining halls, youthful and radiant, gathering around feasts and councils. The narration introduces the listener to the gentle importance of Idun, the goddess who guards the golden apples of immortality. These apples are described slowly, glowing with warmth and promise, the source of the gods' continued youth and vitality. Without them, their strength would wither, their beauty would fade, and Asgard itself would lose its luster. The voice lingers on this image, inviting the audience to picture a garden where such apples hang heavy, golden, and eternal, their presence both comforting and fragile. The narration then shifts to Loki's role in this tale. The story unfolds like a dream sequence, Loki traveling with Odin and Honir beyond the walls of Asgard, wandering into the world where giants dwell. Their journey is described with atmospheric detail, long paths over rocky ground, icy winds brushing their cloaks, and the stillness of forests stretching before them. The listener is encouraged to feel the slow rhythm of travel, the gods moving through an uncertain landscape, their hunger and fatigue mounting. It is during this journey that they encounter Thjatsi, a giant in the form of an eagle. The narration paints this moment softly, but with a hint of unease. The eagle is immense, its wings darkening the sky, its gaze sharp as it hovers above them. Hunger drives the gods to roast an ox, but when they attempt to eat, the eagle claims the food for itself. The tone here remains calm, though a slight tension underlines the mischief to come. Loki, quick-tempered, strikes at the eagle, only to find himself ensnared. The narration stretches this moment, describing how Loki becomes caught in the eagle's talons, dragged helplessly through the air. The imagery should feel surreal, like a dream where flight is both wondrous and terrifying. The eagle reveals himself as Thjatsi and demands a ransom. Loki must lure Idun out of Asgard and bring her, along with her golden apples, into the giant's grasp. The narrator describes Loki's reluctant agreement, his mind already working in sly calculations. In the calm, bedtime pacing, this is not told with drama but with inevitability, as though Loki's tricks always lead him to bargains that carry hidden costs. Returning to Asgard, Loki carries out his promise. The narration describes how he approaches Idun with soft words, telling her of apples outside the walls that seem even more marvelous than her own. Idun, gentle and trusting, follows him, carrying her precious fruit. The voice should treat Idun with tenderness, emphasizing her innocence and the purity of her guardianship. As soon as she steps beyond the safety of Asgard, Thjatsi swoops down in eagle form and carries her away, vanishing into the distance. The god's world begins to change. Slowly, the narration paints the decline. Odin's face creases with age, Thor's mighty arms weaken, Freya's beauty dims. The golden glow of Asgard fades, and shadows grow longer. The bedtime style lingers on these images not as horror, but as a soft inevitability, like autumn leaves falling or twilight deepening. The absence of Idun's apples becomes a quiet sorrow, a reminder that even gods depend on fragile gifts. The Aesir realize the betrayal, and Loki's role is uncovered. In many myths, such revelations bring rage and punishment, but here the telling softens into rhythm. The god's anger is described as heavy but restrained, knowing that Loki, for all his faults, is often the only one clever enough to undo the harm he causes. They demand that he restore Idun and the apples, and Loki, shifting again into resourceful trickster mode, devises a plan. The narration now slows into a new dreamlike sequence, Loki borrowing the feathers of Freya's falcon cloak. The imagery of feathers glinting, the sensation of transformation, is described with softness so that the listener imagines themselves gliding into the air. Loki, as a falcon, soars across the sky to Jotunheim, where he finds Idun imprisoned. With his usual cunning, he changes her into a nut, small, simple, easily carried, and bears her away in his talons. The imagery should feel surreal and almost playful, like something from a half-remembered dream. The chase follows. Thjatsi, realizing the theft, takes eagle form and storms across the sky in pursuit. The narration here balances calm pacing with a touch of tension, describing the sound of wings, the rush of air, the vast sky echoing with pursuit. But the tone remains bedtime gentle, emphasizing the inevitability of the outcome rather than sharp suspense. As Loki nears Asgard, the god's light great fires at the walls. Thjatsi, flying too close in his eagerness, is caught in the flames and falls, defeated. Loki returns Idun to her rightful place, and the apples once again shine in Asgard, restoring youth and vitality to the gods. The story closes with reflection. Loki is both the cause of the disaster and the agent of its solution, embodying his paradoxical role. Idun's innocence is restored, but the gods are left with a lingering awareness of how fragile their strength truly is. The narration softens here into meditation, suggesting that perhaps this story is less about trickery alone and more about the cycles of loss and renewal, the way even divine beings depend on small, vital things to survive. The final sentences ease into imagery, the golden apples glowing once more in Idun's care, the gods shining with youth again, and Loki slipping into the background, smiling faintly, his role unfinished, his mischief only beginning. This prepares the transition into the next section, which will explore his powers of shape-shifting, the strange transformations that make him a figure unlike any other in Norse myth. This section opens by returning to the image of Loki not as one fixed figure, but as someone who never remains entirely the same. Where Thor is always strong and Odin always wise, Loki is change itself. The narration begins with a soft reflection on how myths often use shape-shifting as a symbol of freedom, danger, and imagination. In Loki's case, this power becomes one of his most defining traits, a gift that makes him unpredictable and often uncanny. The tone here remains soothing, encouraging the listener to see transformation not as frightening, but as something dreamlike, as though watching clouds drift and change shape against the evening sky. The story drifts first into Loki's ability to alter his appearance at will. Sometimes he becomes an old woman, his sharp tongue hidden beneath a frail disguise. Other times he becomes an animal, a fish, a bird, a horse. Each form is described slowly, with imagery that lingers. A salmon darting through clear waters, scales glinting like moonlight. A mare with a flowing mane, moving with grace beneath starlight. A falcon soaring above fjords, wings spread wide against the cold northern wind. These images are meant to soothe the imagination, each transformation unfolding with the gentle rhythm of a lullaby. The narration reflects softly on what this means for his identity. Loki cannot be pinned down, and perhaps does not wish to be. Where others are bound to roles, father, ruler, warrior, Loki slips out of boundaries. He shows that identity itself can be fluid, a shifting thing. This observation is delivered slowly, not as lecture but as a calm wondering, inviting the listener to reflect without urgency. In the half-dream state of bedtime, such ideas feel less like philosophy and more like drifting thoughts, gently carried away. The section then introduces stories where Loki's transformations become central. One of the most famous is the tale of how he, in the form of a mare, lured away the stallion Svartalfari, belonging to the giant who was building Asgard's walls. The narration here is told with playfulness, describing how the stallion, strong and determined, was distracted by the graceful mare. Loki, in disguise, trotted away into the woods, the stallion in pursuit, leaving the giant unable to finish his work. The story is humorous and strange, but the telling softens it into something surreal, like a dream where boundaries between human, animal, and god blur. From this union came Sleipnir, Odin's eight-legged horse, one of the most wondrous creatures in Norse myth. The listener is invited to picture Sleipnir, galloping across the sky with a rhythm like a heartbeat, a reminder that from Loki's transformations come not just trouble, but marvels. Another tale unfolds of Loki becoming a salmon to escape capture. The narration slows to describe the image. Loki slipping into the water, his body glistening, darting between rocks as the gods reach for him. The listener can imagine the cool flow of water, the flicker of scales, the sense of freedom in the current. Yet, despite his skill, Loki is caught, a reminder that even transformation cannot always outwit fate. The tone here remains soft, emphasizing the inevitability of capture rather than drama, so that the story feels like drifting into a current rather than tumbling into chaos. The section then allows for a reflective pause. Shape-shifting is more than a magical ability. It represents the way Loki crosses boundaries others dare not. He becomes male and female, human and animal, powerful and weak. In doing so, he unsettles the very order of Asgard, where gods often rely on fixed identities. The narration offers this observation in a gentle, meditative tone, encouraging the listener to see Loki not only as mischievous, but as symbolic of life's constant change. Just as seasons shift, rivers flow, and clouds transform, so too does Loki. Toward the end, the narration returns to imagery, describing Loki not in any single form, but as a shimmer, a presence that slips from one shape to another. He might be a bird perched quietly on a branch, or a figure with a sly smile in the shadows, or a horse galloping across the plains. Each image flickers, never holding still for long, inviting the listener to imagine Loki's transformations as drifting dream scenes, soft and fleeting. The section closes with foreshadowing. Loki's shape-shifting, playful and surreal, often leads to both wonder and catastrophe. The listener is reminded gently that these transformations, while fascinating, are tied to his larger pattern of mischief and disruption. As the narration prepares to move to the next tale, the story of the building of Asgard's walls, where Loki's transformations play a central role, The listener is left with the image of Loki as a figure forever changing, slipping through forms like water through hands. The section begins with a soft return to setting. Asgard in its earliest days, not yet the mighty realm of shimmering walls and golden halls. The gods, though powerful, are uneasy. They know that giants roam the outer worlds, waiting for chances to breach their defenses. The narration describes this atmosphere with slow, careful strokes. Asgard as a place still vulnerable, open to threat, its beauty fragile like a half-finished dream. Into this scene comes a mysterious builder, a giant disguised as a mortal craftsman. He offers to raise a great wall around Asgard, tall and unbreakable, a fortress that would shield the gods from all harm. But such a task, he says, demands a heavy price: the sun, the moon, and the hand of the goddess Freya in marriage. These demands sound shocking, but the narration treats them gently, almost like pieces in a strange bargain whispered at dusk. The gods hesitate, uncertain, until Loki steps forward with his sly counsel. Loki suggests they agree to the builder's terms, but with one condition: he must complete the wall within a single season, without help from any man. The narration softens into rhythm, describing the gods nodding at this clever bargain, thinking the task impossible. If the builder fails, Asgard loses nothing. If he succeeds, Loki will surely find a way to undo him. The mood is dreamlike, half trusting, half doubtful. As the work begins, the gods watch with unease. The builder labors tirelessly, but he is not alone. His stallion, Svartalfari, proves stronger than 10 men, dragging stones of immense size, shaping the wall faster than anyone imagined. The narration lingers on the image of the horse, muscles gleaming, hooves striking sparks, the sound of stone grinding against stone as the wall rises. Day by day, the structure grows higher, and the gods begin to feel dread, realizing they may indeed lose Freya, and with her, the balance of their world. The bedtime style emphasizes the slow passage of time, each day of construction described like a beat in a lullaby. The stones stacking higher, the wall encircling more of Asgard, the builder's silence, and the tireless rhythm of the horse. The gods' unease grows, but Loki, once so confident, now feels the weight of his trick. When only days remain in the season, and the wall stands nearly complete, the gods turn their anger on Loki. They remind him that this was his plan, his bargain, his responsibility. If he does not find a way to stop the builder, he will face punishment. The narration describes Loki's unease not in sharp tones, but in soft reflection. The trickster who often laughs at his own games now finds himself cornered. Yet, true to his nature, he finds another path, one that only a shapeshifter like him could take. Here the story enters its most surreal moment. Loki transforms into a mare, a graceful and alluring horse. The narration paints this gently: the flowing mane, the sound of hooves, the way the mare trots just beyond Svartalfari's reach. The stallion, caught by desire, abandons his work to chase after her, leaving the builder helpless without his powerful companion. The image is told like a dream: the chase through meadows, the sound of pounding hooves, the moonlight shining on restless figures. Because of Loki's transformation, the builder fails to complete the wall in time. When his true giant form is revealed in his rage, the gods destroy him. The narration lingers less on violence and more on the sense of inevitability. The bargain broken, the wall unfinished, the gods once again safe. Yet, this safety comes not from their own wisdom, but from Loki's strange and unsettling cunning. The story continues softly to its curious aftermath. From Loki's union in the form of the mare comes Sleipnir, the wondrous 8-legged horse, swift beyond all creatures, destined to be Odin's steed. The narration lingers here with gentle imagery. Sleipnir's gallop across the sky, hooves beating like thunder, his 8 legs moving with impossible grace. Though born of deception, Sleipnir becomes one of the most marvelous beings in Norse mythology, a reminder that Loki's mischief often creates wonders as well as problems. The section then shifts into reflection. The narration suggests that this story is not only about a wall, but about trust, bargains, and the unexpected paths that trickery can take. Loki, both the cause of the danger and the solution, again embodies contradiction. The gods' reliance on him, even when they despise him, reveals how deeply his cunning is woven into the fabric of their world. As the tale softens toward its close, the listener is left with the image of Asgard's great wall, strong and unbroken, built partly through the labors of a giant, partly through the mischief of Loki, and partly through the unexpected birth of Sleipnir. The wall stands not just as protection, but as a symbol of the uneasy bargains between order and chaos, strength and trickery, permanence and change. The final sentences prepare for transition. Loki, in his shifting forms, continues to weave himself into Asgard's fate. The next story will show him once again at the heart of conflict and rescue, in the tale of how he helps Thor reclaim his stolen hammer, another misadventure where his cleverness both causes and resolves chaos. This section begins by softly transitioning from the tale of Asgard's walls to a quieter, journey-like rhythm. The narration introduces Thor, the god of thunder, traveling alongside Loki, who is ever-present as both companion and unpredictable influence. The tone emphasizes calm observation rather than action-packed urgency, allowing the listener to imagine the two gods walking through misty valleys, along forest paths, or across starlit fjords. The landscape itself is described gently, almost like a lullaby, with the sound of wind in the pines or the distant ripple of water beneath frozen rocks. The outline emphasizes the contrast between Thor and Loki. Thor is direct, physical, a god whose strength is obvious and unyielding. Loki, by contrast, is subtle, clever, and fluid, moving like smoke through the world, often unseen until his presence is felt. This contrast forms a central thread of the section. While Thor represents order, might, and reliability, Loki embodies unpredictability, wit, and clever intervention. The narration should dwell on these differences slowly, inviting the listener to reflect on how opposites can coexist, creating both tension and harmony. The section then gently recounts small tales of mischief and cooperation, showing the duo as a pair whose adventures are never simple. Sometimes Loki disrupts Thor's plans, pulling pranks, leading him into humorous or awkward situations. Other times, he provides solutions only his cunning could imagine, rescuing Thor from traps or adversaries. The tone remains soft and dreamlike, describing these adventures less as exciting escapades and more as unfolding scenarios, rich with imagery. Thor striding forward, hammer in hand, and Loki slipping silently alongside, his shadow blending with twilight. One tale might involve their journey to retrieve a lost or stolen object, with Loki's cleverness balancing Thor's brute force. The narration emphasizes pacing, showing how the gods move through forests or over mountains, and how Loki's transformations or deceptions play crucial roles. For example, if Thor is caught in a trap or challenged by giants, Loki's quick thinking provides a path to freedom. The listener is encouraged to imagine these sequences in a calm, cinematic way, picturing landscapes shifting as the gods travel and the quiet cleverness of Loki weaving through them. The section also allows for reflection on their relationship. Loki's mischief is sometimes irritating, sometimes dangerous, yet Thor tolerates it because he recognizes that Loki's cleverness often saves the day. This interplay creates a delicate balance. Frustration and gratitude coexist. The narration can softly explore the psychology of this dynamic, showing how even in mythical worlds, relationships are complicated, full of contradictions, and sometimes maintained through necessity rather than affection. Throughout, the listener is reminded of Loki's dual role, both a source of disruption and an agent of problem-solving. This duality is presented in a soothing, measured rhythm rather than dramatic tension. Loki's cunning is described almost like a breeze that shifts the course of events quietly, gently steering the narrative without jarring the listener. At the same time, Thor's steadfastness grounds the stories, providing a calm anchor amidst Loki's fluidity. The narration gently touches on humor and irony. Loki often speaks in riddles or misleads Thor in subtle ways, causing temporary frustration but also revealing hidden truths or opportunities. These moments are described softly, as if overhearing whispers in a dream, and the listener is invited to appreciate the playful intelligence behind them. The section frames these interactions not as conflict, but as part of the rhythm of their partnership, a dance of opposites that moves the myth forward while maintaining a restful tone. As the section progresses, small adventures transition into larger consequences. Loki's schemes, while playful, sometimes provoke giants, other gods, or unforeseen dangers, requiring Thor's strength to intervene. The narration describes these moments slowly, balancing tension with calm. The sound of a distant river, the rustle of leaves, or the shadow of a looming figure. Each image is soft and dreamlike, keeping the listener immersed without feeling alarmed. Toward the end of the section, the narration reflects on what these stories reveal about Loki and Thor. Loki is not merely a prankster, nor Thor merely a warrior. Their relationship is symbiotic, a combination of strategy and force, wit and might. The listener is encouraged to see that in myth, as in life, collaboration often emerges from unlikely partnerships, and that even chaos can serve purpose when guided thoughtfully. The final sentences of the section gently foreshadow upcoming tales, noting that Loki's cleverness will soon intersect with events of higher stakes, such as battles with giants or the loss of divine treasures. Yet, the tone remains soft, leaving the listener with the image of Thor and Loki walking side by side through twilight landscapes, moving at a pace that allows both story and rest to unfold together. The next section will continue to explore Loki's more dramatic words and actions at Asgard's Hall, where his wit and boldness take center stage. This section opens by setting a soft, atmospheric scene, Asgard's Great Hall, where the gods and other beings gather to feast. The narration emphasizes warmth and comfort, describing long tables glinting with golden cups, flickering fires casting gentle shadows, and the scent of roasted food mingling with the cool, northern air outside. The listener is invited to imagine themselves in a quiet corner of the hall, observing without urgency, letting the story unfold like a slow, melodic dream. Into this serene space steps Loki, whose presence immediately draws attention. Unlike the other gods, whose behavior is governed by etiquette and expectation, Loki moves unpredictably, speaking and acting in ways that unsettle and amuse. The outline emphasizes calm pacing, noting that his mischief is not presented as chaotic drama, but as playful, verbal artistry, a series of riddles, taunts, and clever remarks that ripple through the hall. The storytelling here is deliberate and soothing, with pauses to let each clever remark land in the listener's imagination. The narration gently introduces the concept of a flighting, a contest of verbal skill and insult common in Norse culture. These contests were not meant for violence, but for wit, social cunning, and the playful testing of boundaries. Loki thrives in this environment, using language as his instrument. The section describes him speaking in turns, teasing, provoking, and outmaneuvering opponents with words alone. The imagery evokes a quiet mental dance rather than a loud confrontation. Eyes glinting, lips curling in amusement, voices measured, words floating like soft sparks in the hall's warm air. As Loki engages with other gods, the narration explores the contrast between his cleverness and the other figure's pride or rigidity. Where Thor relies on strength, Odin on wisdom, and Freya on diplomacy, Loki relies on imagination, subtlety, and timing. Each clever remark he makes is described slowly, allowing the listener to appreciate the rhythm and cunning behind the speech. The story lingers on Loki's mental agility rather than the content of insults, emphasizing the artistry rather than aggression. The section moves into a few illustrative examples of Loki's verbal exploits. Perhaps he mocks a boast, twists a compliment into irony, or tells a story that simultaneously entertains and unsettles. The narration treats these tales gently, focusing on the mood and imagery rather than sharpness of the words. The listener is encouraged to see Loki as a performer in a dreamlike play, whose cleverness is a form of movement through thought and social space, rather than conflict meant to provoke anxiety. The outline allows space to reflect on why Loki thrives in these settings. Verbal contests give him a stage, a domain where his intelligence and creativity outshine physical might. The storytelling voice can muse softly that in mythology, as in life, some beings excel in subtlety rather than brute force, in wit rather than direct action. Loki's cleverness here is framed as a natural, calming rhythm, a mental flow that captivates, delights, and sometimes unsettles the gods, all without harsh tension for the listener. The section also notes that Loki's words often carry consequences, foreshadowing later stories. Even a playful insult or clever remark can ripple outward, influencing decisions, igniting rivalries, or subtly guiding events. The narration emphasizes this with soft imagery, ripples across a quiet pond, a gentle wind stirring the branches outside, shadows moving across the hall. These consequences are suggested rather than dramatized, maintaining a calm bedtime cadence while hinting at the mythic weight of Loki's actions. Throughout, the narration maintains a sense of rhythm and pacing. Pauses are built in for reflection, letting each moment sink into the listener's mind as gentle, floating impressions. Loki's laughter, the tilt of his head, the sparkle in his eyes, all are described with care, creating a vivid yet soothing mental picture. The storytelling encourages immersion, like drifting alongside a slowly turning scene in a dream, where every small detail matters but never alarms. Toward the end, the section expands into reflection on Loki's dual nature. His cleverness entertains and protects, yet it also disrupts. Words that amuse today may provoke disaster tomorrow. The narration draws attention to this balance without urgency, framing it as a soft meditation on the interplay between chaos and order, wit and consequence, humor and caution. The section closes with gentle foreshadowing. Loki's verbal skill at Asgard's Hall is only one of the many ways he influences Asgard's fate. The listener is prepared for the next section, where Loki's cunning leads to both mischief and danger in the story of the Mead of Poetry. The final image is soft and lingering. Loki smiling faintly across the firelit hall, his mind always moving, words shimmering like sparks that illuminate the shadows but fade gently into night, leaving a sense of quiet anticipation. This section begins by drifting into the atmosphere of a quiet, misty landscape where mountains, rivers, and forests meet in gentle harmony. The narrator sets the scene of the mead's origin, a magical brew, golden and fragrant, capable of granting the gift of poetry, wisdom, and inspiration to anyone who tastes it. The mead is described not as a physical object alone, but as a dreamlike presence, shimmering in the imagination, its glow soft and inviting. The listener is encouraged to picture a hidden hall in the giant's realm, filled with the scent of honey and the quiet hum of magic. The narration introduces the conflict slowly. The mead is held by the giant Suttung, who is fiercely protective of it. The gods of Asgard desire it, knowing that its power can elevate thought, speech, and inspiration. The tone is calm and measured, presenting this desire not as greed, but as a quiet necessity, a longing for knowledge and art that is universal and timeless. The stage is set for Loki's intervention, his cunning positioned as the key to bridging worlds and achieving what strength alone cannot. Loki's role unfolds gently, emphasizing his cleverness and adaptability. He volunteers to retrieve the mead, a task impossible for brute strength alone. The narration lingers on his preparation, slipping into disguise, moving silently through mountains and forests, observing the giant's behaviors with patience. His transformation is soft and dreamlike, perhaps changing into a bird or another subtle form, allowing the listener to drift into imagery that is surreal but calming. The outline details how Loki infiltrates Suttung's hall, using wit, persuasion, and trickery. He charms or deceives the giant's daughter, Gunlod, who guards the mead. The narration treats this interaction carefully, focusing on the cleverness of the plan rather than dramatic tension or peril. Gunlod's presence is soft and luminous in the imagination, a gentle counterpart to Loki's sly movements. Together, they navigate the spaces between vigilance and mischief, creating a scene of quiet intrigue rather than violent confrontation. Once Loki secures access to the mead, the story transitions into his daring escape. He transforms again, often into a bird, and flies across mountains, rivers, and forests, carrying the precious mead back to Asgard. The narration emphasizes the flowing rhythm of flight, wind and feathers, sun glinting on scales or wings, the landscape passing below like a slowly turning dream. The listener is invited to feel the motion and the calm suspense, rather than anxiety, as Loki navigates the skies. The tale then shifts to the arrival of the mead in Asgard, where Odin and the other gods receive it. The narration paints this moment as a soft, celebratory culmination, a quiet return of beauty, wisdom, and inspiration. The mead's golden glow spreads through the halls, bringing subtle rejuvenation rather than loud triumph. Loki's cleverness is again central. The god's needs are met not through force, but through ingenuity, risk, and transformation. This reinforces the recurring theme of his dual role as both instigator and resolver of events. The section also allows for reflection on the symbolism of the mead. It is not just a magical drink, but an emblem of inspiration, the mysterious spark that allows words, ideas, and poetry to flow. Loki's journey to obtain it mirrors the journey of thought itself, unpredictable, creative, and full of detours. The narration encourages the listener to meditate on this, imagining knowledge and artistry as gifts that must be sought, navigated, and sometimes won through cleverness rather than sheer power. Soft contrasts are woven throughout. Loki's cunning, though beneficial here, is always tinged with unpredictability. The listener is reminded that the same traits that enable his success, slyness, risk-taking, transformation, can also bring chaos. The tone remains calm and reflective, framing Loki's traits as part of the natural ebb and flow of mythic life, not as immediate danger or threat. Toward the end, the narration touches on the larger significance of Loki's actions. By securing the mead, he shapes the cultural and divine landscape, influencing the spread of knowledge and poetry throughout the realms. Yet, like all of Loki's deeds, the story carries ambiguity. Cleverness and disruption are intertwined, and even the greatest gifts may come with unforeseen consequences. The listener is encouraged to rest in this thought gently, letting it drift like a soft current of reflection. The section closes with an evocative image: Loki, in some shifting form, flying across the sky with the mead, sunlight glinting off his wings, the landscape below quiet and expansive. The listener senses both the end of one adventure and the quiet promise of the next, knowing that Loki's cunning will continue to ripple through Asgard's stories. This prepares the transition into the next section, which explores one of his most infamous acts, the death of Balder, while maintaining a calm, immersive storytelling tone. This section opens with a serene description of Asgard, emphasizing light, beauty, and harmony. Balder, the god of light, beauty, and purity, is introduced as a figure whose very presence seems to make the world shine brighter. The narration encourages the listener to imagine Balder walking through golden halls, sunlight glinting off his hair, laughter ringing softly through quiet courtyards. The tone is calm and immersive, focusing on the radiance of Balder as a symbol of peace and the fleeting nature of perfection in a world full of change. The story gently transitions to the foreshadowing of tragedy. Balder begins to have dreams of his own death, visions soft and haunting, drifting through his mind like mist across water. The gods, concerned for their beloved companion, gather in Asgard to protect him. Every object is tested: swords, stones, and arrows are thrown, each meeting Balder harmlessly. The narration describes this process in a soothing, repetitive rhythm, highlighting the protective magic without tension or fear, almost like a lullaby, emphasizing the calm order the gods attempt to maintain. Loki's introduction into this story is gradual. He is described as a shadow at the edge of the gathering, observing with quiet calculation. The narration maintains his dual nature. His presence is subtle yet powerful, mischievous but soft, like a breeze that bends a leaf rather than breaking it. Loki notices a weakness: the mistletoe, overlooked by the gods, small and seemingly insignificant. The section lingers on this discovery, emphasizing imagery over drama. The delicate sprig of mistletoe, fragile and green, swaying lightly, a tiny agent with enormous consequence. The outline gently narrates Loki's crafting of the plan. He fashions a spear or dart from the mistletoe and offers it to Hr, Balder's blind brother. Loki's role is described not with malice, but as inevitability. His cunning sets events in motion, a quiet ripple in the fabric of fate. The narration emphasizes careful pacing, letting the listener dwell on the tension of cause and effect without creating alarm. The scene unfolds like a soft, inexorable drift toward a moment that feels both destined and sorrowful. Baldur's death is recounted with imagery and calm reflection. The mistletoe dart strikes its mark, and Baldur falls. The narration describes the god's sorrow in gentle, resonant tones, emphasizing loss, grief, and the quiet ripple of consequence. Baldur's light dims, and Asgard feels a subtle shadow creeping into its corners. This is framed as a natural shift rather than a sudden shock, allowing the listener to absorb the emotional depth without tension, evoking a reflective, contemplative mood. The section explores the reactions of the gods. Odin, Thor, Frigg, and others attempt to undo the tragedy, seeking oaths from all things in the world to not harm Baldur. Loki's trickery is revealed fully, and the god's anger is tempered with inevitability. The storyteller emphasizes reflection rather than vengeance. The tone remains soft, meditative, and immersive, highlighting the moral and mythological lessons of fate, responsibility, and the interplay of cunning and consequence. Next, the narration touches on the broader implications of Baldur's death. It is a story that foreshadows Ragnarok, the end of the god's age. Loki's actions, while subtle, set in motion a series of events that ripple through all realms. The narration presents these consequences gently, like shadows lengthening at twilight, emphasizing inevitability and interconnectedness rather than fear or suspense. The listener is invited to ponder the idea that even small actions, a single misstep, a tiny sprig of mistletoe, can influence the course of worlds. The outline allows for soft reflection on Loki's duality. In this story, his cleverness causes sorrow, yet it is entwined with the natural order of myth. Loki is neither purely evil nor purely malevolent. He is the force that challenges harmony, showing that even perfection cannot last, and that disruption is part of the cosmic rhythm. The narration encourages the listener to rest in this complexity, appreciating the interplay of light and shadow, order and mischief, life and loss. The section includes a brief, reflective pause on Baldur's enduring legacy. His death is mourned by gods and mortals alike, but it is also remembered as a symbol of beauty, light, and the fragility of perfection. The narration frames this in soft imagery, golden light fading into dusk, a gentle wind carrying whispers of memory, and the quiet patience of time. The tone remains calm, allowing the audience to absorb the story's depth without tension. The section closes with foreshadowing, linking Baldur's death to future events. Loki, whose mischief has reshaped Asgard, continues to influence the fates of gods and mortals alike. The narration ends on a soft, reflective note, leaving the listener with the image of Loki slipping into shadows, a figure of cunning and ambiguity, while Baldur's light lingers in memory, a calm, enduring presence even in loss. The next section will continue exploring Loki's escalating mischief and the complex web of consequences he weaves in the events leading up to Ragnarok. This section begins with a quiet transition from the sorrow of Baldur's death to the somber atmosphere of Asgard, now weighed down by grief and the looming sense of inevitability. The narration sets the scene in gentle, immersive detail, shadowed halls, golden light dimmed, the gods moving quietly through their duties, their faces etched with sadness. The listener is invited to drift into this atmosphere, feeling the heaviness of consequence without tension or urgency. The outline introduces the search for Loki. After Baldur's death, the gods discover his role in the tragedy and understand that his mischief has gone too far. The narration emphasizes calm inevitability rather than pursuit drama. Loki, aware of his exposure, slips through realms, moving silently among mountains, rivers, and forests, leaving subtle traces that eventually reveal his presence. The imagery evokes a quiet cat-and-mouse rhythm, like shadows stretching and bending in the fading light. The narration then shifts to Loki's capture. He is discovered hiding in a cave or remote wilderness, a soft description of his attempted concealment, rock walls, narrow passages, and the whisper of wind through the cracks. The gods, guided by Odin's foresight, trap him with careful planning. This is presented not as violent action but as methodical inevitability, emphasizing strategy and cosmic order rather than brutality. The listener is encouraged to imagine the scene as a quiet settling of fate, the capture unfolding with calm precision. Next, the story moves into the details of Loki's punishment. The narration describes the scene gently, a cavernous space, quiet except for the sound of dripping water, where Loki is bound with the entrails of his son, a symbol both of justice and irony. A serpent is positioned above him, dripping venom onto his face, while Seijen, his loyal wife, remains at his side, holding a bowl to catch the venom. The imagery is carefully softened. Dripping venom is described slowly, like a distant rain, the cave echoing with a subdued rhythm rather than terror. This framing preserves the bedtime-friendly tone while conveying the gravity of punishment. The outline emphasizes Seijen's presence and her steadfast devotion. Her figure is painted with warmth and quiet persistence, holding the bowl to protect Loki despite his transgressions. The narration dwells on this image, highlighting themes of loyalty, endurance, and love amidst suffering. The listener is invited to focus on the calm, meditative aspects of the scene, the patient act of holding the bowl, the rhythm of the drops, the slow passage of time, rather than on fear or shock. The section reflects on the symbolism of Loki's punishment. His binding represents the inevitable consequences of mischief unchecked, while the venom and the intermittent relief provided by Seijen illustrate the interplay of suffering, mercy, and endurance. The narration maintains a gentle tone, framing the scene as a meditation on responsibility and the balance of order and chaos. Loki's punishment is both personal and cosmic, echoing through the realms as a quiet lesson in the consequences of cunning that tips too far toward disruption. The story also explores Loki's enduring presence even in punishment. Though bound and suffering, he remains clever, restless, and perceptive. The narration suggests that his mind continues to weave, planning, observing, and influencing events in subtle ways, emphasizing the duality of his character, constrained in body but free in thought. This encourages the listener to see Loki as a complex figure, whose mischief and intelligence persist even when overt action is impossible. The outline then allows space for reflection on cosmic balance. Loki's capture and punishment demonstrate that Asgard and the cosmos require limits, that mischief must have boundaries to maintain order. Yet, even as he is restrained, the story reminds the listener that chaos and cunning are never fully extinguished. The tone here is soft and meditative, emphasizing natural cycles of action and consequence rather than harsh judgment or tension. The narration subtly transitions to the anticipation of Ragnarok. Loki's punishment, while severe, is not eternal in the mythic sense. It is part of the unfolding pattern that will lead to the gods' end times. The section emphasizes calm foreshadowing. Shadows lengthen across Asgard, storms gather gently on distant horizons, and the air carries the quiet sense of inevitability. The listener is prepared for future stories where Loki's influence will again reshape the world, even from his bound position. The section closes with a soft, reflective image. Loki, bound in the cavern, venom dripping slowly, Seijen steadfast at his side, the silence of the cave punctuated only by distant echoes. The narration encourages the listener to rest in this image as a meditation on consequence, cunning, and endurance. Loki remains both a cautionary figure and a symbol of the persistence of cleverness, preparing the listener to continue into the next chapters of Norse myth, where his influence ripples toward Ragnarok. This section begins by setting a soft, foreboding tone, painting the world on the brink of change. The narration describes twilight settling over Asgard, rivers darkening, and winds whispering through forests and mountains. The imagery is dreamlike, with a slow, meditative rhythm that encourages the listener to drift gently into the story. The world itself seems to sense that something immense is approaching, though the focus remains calm rather than alarming. Loki's role in Ragnarok is introduced gradually. Though bound after Baldur's death, he will not remain passive forever. The narration emphasizes his duality, a being of chaos and cunning, capable of both subtle mischief and world-altering action. Even while imprisoned, Loki's influence lingers like a soft shadow across Asgard, a quiet reminder that balance is never absolute. The listener is encouraged to feel the tension as an inevitable drift rather than sudden threat, maintaining a bedtime-friendly tone. The section describes the breaking of his bonds. Loki is freed at the onset of Ragnarok, released by the forces that will bring about the end times. The imagery is slow and surreal. The snake's venom no longer drips. The cavern walls seem to dissolve into light and shadow, and Loki emerges, neither fully monstrous nor entirely divine, a being poised on the edge of action. The narration emphasizes the calm inevitability of his release, framing it as part of a natural mythic cycle rather than violent drama. The outline then shifts to Loki gathering his forces. Giants, monsters, and the sons of Muspel rise alongside him, forming a formidable host to challenge the gods. The narration paints these scenes gently, using imagery that is more poetic than frightening: fiery landscapes, distant roars that resemble the rumble of thunder, and armies moving like tides across a dreamlike horizon. The focus is on scale and rhythm rather than intensity, allowing the listener to immerse in the story without alarm. Loki confronts the gods directly. The narration emphasizes the inevitability of these encounters rather than sharp conflict. Thor, Odin, and the other Aesir meet Loki on battlefields of cosmic proportions. Yet the telling remains soft, describing motion and presence in a dreamlike, almost surreal way. The clash of beings is rhythmic, echoing like distant waves, the energy vast but muted, like observing events from a distance or through mist. The section highlights Loki's dual nature once more. He fights with cunning, strength, and unpredictability, embodying the chaos that has always defined him. Yet the narration softens these moments, focusing less on destruction and more on the inevitability of cycles. How Loki, previously a trickster in small mischief, now becomes a catalyst for the culmination of cosmic events. The listener is guided to reflect on the continuity of myth. The same qualities that enabled clever feats and subtle pranks now shape the end of an age. The outline then allows for reflection on fate and inevitability. Ragnarok, though devastating, is portrayed as a natural process rather than horror. Loki's role is a necessary part of the mythic order, a reminder that mischief, cunning, and disruption are woven into the fabric of the cosmos. The narration encourages calm meditation, letting the listener consider the interplay between chaos and order, cause and effect, without anxiety. The story continues with key encounters, focusing on symbolism rather than graphic detail. Loki faces Heimdall, the vigilant guardian of Bifrost. Their battle is described in slow, dreamlike imagery, rhythmic motions, glances that seem to stretch across time, energies clashing like waves in a distant ocean. The narration emphasizes the balance of inevitability and symmetry, portraying Loki as a mirror of cosmic tension rather than a figure of terror. Next, the narration touches on the broader consequences of Loki's actions during Ragnarok. His participation leads to massive transformations: the death of gods, the reshaping of the realms, and the eventual rebirth of the world. The imagery is soft, reflective, and almost lullaby-like. Fires consume but also cleanse, waters rise and fall, and new lands emerge from the aftermath. The listener is guided to perceive destruction as transformation, chaos as part of the natural flow, maintaining a calm and meditative tone. The section then briefly reflects on Loki's legacy. Though often cast as the villain, his actions reveal complexity. He is a necessary force, one whose mischief and cunning are intertwined with the cycles of life, death, and renewal. The narration encourages the listener to meditate on this ambiguity, seeing Loki not as purely evil, but as a reflection of change itself: unpredictable, transformative, and essential. The section closes with an image of Loki at the end of Ragnarok, a figure silhouetted against a sky of fire and twilight, neither fully triumphant nor defeated. The narration emphasizes calm reflection. The world has shifted, the old order has ended, and Loki, like the tides of myth itself, continues to exist as both a reminder and a catalyst. This sets up the transition to the next section, which will explore Loki's enduring presence in stories, his influence on culture, and the lessons drawn from his complex mythology. This section opens with a soft reflection on the enduring presence of Loki in myth and imagination. The narration invites the listener to drift into the idea that stories, like rivers, flow across time, carrying characters, lessons, and symbols with them. Loki's figure is described gently, ever-shifting, cunning, unpredictable, yet deeply entwined with the lives of gods and humans alike. The tone is meditative, encouraging the audience to picture Loki's influence as a subtle current, shaping events quietly but profoundly. The narration emphasizes Loki's duality as the foundation of his legacy. He is neither purely good nor purely evil. Rather, he embodies the tension between order and chaos, mischief and cleverness. The section gently explores how this duality allows him to catalyze both disaster and creation. The listener is guided to see that Loki's actions, from stealing Idun's apples to aiding in the retrieval of the mead of poetry, create ripple effects that shape the world and the stories told about it. Each tale is a soft echo of his restless presence, like a whisper drifting through history. The outline then touches on Loki's influence on the gods and humans alike. His mischief often tests their wisdom, courage, and patience, serving as both challenge and lesson. The narration frames these stories calmly, suggesting that even conflict can be instructive when observed with thoughtfulness. Loki's schemes force characters, divine and mortal, to adapt, to reflect, and to act in ways they might not otherwise. The listener is encouraged to meditate on this interplay, appreciating how disruption can foster growth and insight, even in mythic worlds. Next, the narration explores the symbolic meanings associated with Loki. He represents transformation, the unpredictable nature of fate, and the creative potential of chaos. The section gently describes how myths often use Loki as a mirror. Through his cunning and trickery, listeners and readers are invited to reflect on human behavior, morality, and the delicate balance between order and disorder. This reflection is slow and immersive, allowing the audience to consider deeper themes without tension, like observing a landscape in twilight, calm yet full of life. The outline then discusses Loki's enduring presence in stories beyond the original myths. The narration touches on his appearances in sagas, poetry, and modern adaptations, showing how his figure continues to inspire imagination, storytelling, and contemplation. The focus remains gentle, emphasizing the universality of his traits, cleverness, mischief, unpredictability, and how these resonate across cultures and generations. The listener is invited to imagine Loki drifting through stories, a constant presence guiding reflection and wonder. The narration highlights Loki's relationships and how they shape his legacy. His interactions with other gods, such as Odin, Thor, and Balder, reveal lessons about trust, loyalty, and the consequences of cunning. The section emphasizes subtlety over conflict. Loki's influence is pervasive not through brute force, but through the delicate art of cleverness. The listener is encouraged to observe these dynamics as quiet ripples in a calm pond, each interaction producing reflections that deepen the understanding of myth. The section also gently considers the moral complexity of Loki's character. He is a reminder that not all mischief is malevolent, and that wisdom and cleverness can be found in unexpected places. The narration frames this with soft imagery, a shifting shadow at sunset, a trickle of water carving a path through stone, or a flickering flame illuminating both light and darkness. These images allow the listener to meditate on ambiguity and the nuanced nature of morality, reflecting the richness of Norse mythology itself. The outline then emphasizes Loki's cultural and symbolic influence. Beyond Norse myth, his archetype, the clever trickster, appears in stories worldwide, demonstrating the enduring human fascination with figures who challenge boundaries, question authority, and navigate uncertainty with intelligence. The narration frames this as a gentle exploration, allowing the audience to see Loki as both a mythic figure and a symbol of creativity, adaptability, and the transformative power of wit. The section concludes by reflecting on the emotional resonance of Loki's legacy. Listeners are guided to appreciate the mix of caution and admiration his stories evoke, a reminder of the fragility of order, the power of cleverness, and the inevitability of change. The narration softens into imagery, twilight settling over distant landscapes, rivers flowing quietly through forests, and shadows moving slowly with the wind, all echoing Loki's enduring presence as a subtle, guiding force in myth and imagination. Finally, the section gently transitions to the next story segment, preparing the listener to explore more of Loki's later tales and transformations, reinforcing the theme of continuity and the dreamlike persistence of mythic storytelling. The tone remains calm and immersive, leaving the audience with a sense of reflective curiosity and soft anticipation for the next chapter of the narrative. This section opens by drifting into a soft, contemplative tone, exploring the more personal and mystical side of Loki. The narration invites the listener to imagine quiet, shadowy corners of the cosmos, where even mischief and chaos give rise to life. Loki's children are introduced as extraordinary beings, each born of his cunning and unpredictability, reflecting his duality while influencing the fate of gods and mortals alike. The listener is encouraged to see these figures not as terrifying creatures, but as dreamlike symbols of transformation and consequence. The section begins with Fenrir, the giant wolf, whose size and strength are immense. The narration describes Fenrir's birth in calm, evocative imagery, a wolf pup growing swiftly under twilight skies, fur glinting like night shadows, eyes reflecting a quiet, latent power. Fenrir is both beautiful and formidable, a creature whose existence represents the tension between freedom and control. The storytelling focuses on his early life and the god's fear of his potential, framing the narrative with soft pacing and reflective pauses to immerse the listener in the wonder and inevitability surrounding Fenrir. Next, the narration moves to Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, whose massive coils stretch across the oceans. This tale is told with flowing, rhythmic imagery, waves rippling gently beneath a silver moon, currents shifting like slow breathing, and the serpent winding through the waters with an almost hypnotic grace. The story emphasizes the dreamlike nature of the serpent's presence, portraying its enormity and symbolism in a calm, meditative tone rather than a frightening one. Jormungandr represents the vast, hidden forces that shape the world, a reflection of Loki's reach and influence. The outline then introduces Hel, the ruler of the underworld, whose domain is mysterious and shadowed. The narration paints her realm with soft, subdued imagery, twilight mist drifting over still waters, quiet corridors lined with faintly glowing stones, and a sense of calm rather than terror. Hel embodies endings, transformation, and the inevitability of fate. The section emphasizes that Loki's children often personify forces beyond human control, and that their stories carry lessons about acceptance, patience, and reflection. The listener is invited to explore the quiet majesty and somber beauty of her domain. The storytelling shifts to the interactions between these children and the gods. The narration describes the gods' cautious attempts to contain or negotiate with them, presenting each scene with gentle pacing. Fenrir is bound with carefully crafted chains, Jormungandr cast into the sea, and Hel given dominion over the underworld. The tone remains immersive and soft, focusing on the quiet balance between control and inevitability rather than drama or violence. The listener can imagine the scenes unfolding like a slow, deliberate dance between fate and choice, strength and restraint. The outline also explores the symbolic resonance of Loki's children. Each represents a different aspect of his nature: cunning, power, transformation, and inevitability. The narration gently ties this back to broader themes: chaos giving rise to order, danger giving rise to wisdom, and disruption creating opportunities for reflection and growth. The storytelling encourages the audience to meditate on these symbols, appreciating their role in the unfolding mythology without fear or tension. The narration includes reflective imagery of Loki watching his children from afar, a figure both proud and apprehensive. His influence persists through them, a soft reminder that actions have enduring consequences. Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel are extensions of his mischief and cunning, each playing roles that ripple through the cosmos. The listener is encouraged to see Loki's legacy in these children as both beautiful and inevitable, a quiet thread connecting mischief, transformation, and destiny. Next, the section considers the foreshadowing of Ragnarok. Fenrir will break free, Jormungandr will rise from the oceans, and Hel will participate in the shaping of the new world. The narration frames these future events with gentle inevitability rather than alarm. Shadows lengthening at twilight, distant waves rising and falling rhythmically, and the quiet patience of the underworld. The audience is invited to reflect on cycles of change, transformation, and consequence, natural rhythms of myth that echo softly in the imagination. The storytelling then gently explores the relationships between the children. Though each has distinct roles, they are united by their heritage and their connection to Loki. The narration emphasizes their individuality while highlighting subtle parallels. Each embodies a form of chaos, transformation, or hidden power, reflecting the duality of mischief and purpose that defines their father. This creates a meditative, cohesive reflection on familial ties, legacy, and the intertwined nature of mythic forces. The section closes with a soft, evocative image. Loki standing at the edge of twilight landscapes, watching his children, Fenrir in the forests, Jormungandr beneath the ocean, Hel in her shadowed halls. The narration emphasizes calm reflection. Though mischief and chaos shape them, they are part of a larger cosmic rhythm, and their presence continues the quiet, ongoing influence of Loki in the myths. The next section will explore Loki's interactions with gods and mortals after Baldur's death, showing the continued unfolding of his mischief and cunning in stories beyond Ragnarok. This section opens by gently transitioning from the legacy of Loki's children to his continued exploits among gods and mortals. The narration sets a dreamlike tone, describing quiet landscapes across the 9 realms, misty forests, winding rivers, starlit mountains, and the hushed halls of Asgard. Loki moves through these worlds like a shifting shadow, subtle yet ever-present. The listener is encouraged to feel the slow rhythm of his movements, the soft unfolding of stories as if drifting through a calm dreamscape. The narration begins with Loki's pranks that are less cosmic but still significant, demonstrating his wit and unpredictability. He may disguise himself, speak in riddles, or manipulate objects and circumstances to create minor chaos among gods and mortals alike. The outline emphasizes pacing and imagery. A cup of mead overturned with a quiet splash, an illusion of fire dancing across a hall, a whispered word causing gentle confusion. These incidents are described softly, focusing on cleverness and surprise rather than alarm, maintaining the bedtime-friendly tone. The section then introduces Loki's involvement in more elaborate adventures. One story might recount his role in stealing treasures or devising clever schemes that test the ingenuity of gods like Thor and Odin. The narration lingers on descriptive details, shimmering objects hidden in plain sight, secret passages through mountains, or subtle manipulations of natural elements. Each adventure is presented as a sequence of contemplative images, allowing the listener to visualize Loki's cleverness unfolding in calm, immersive rhythm. The outline highlights Loki's dual role as both disruptor and helper. Often, his schemes create problems that only he can resolve, reinforcing the pattern of trickster logic. The narration describes how gods initially frustrated by his mischief eventually rely on his cunning to navigate challenges, showing the balance of chaos and utility in his character. The storytelling is measured and reflective, encouraging the audience to consider how mischief, intelligence, and adaptability are interwoven in myth. Next, the narration gently explores Loki's use of shape-shifting in these later adventures. He continues to transform into animals, humans, and other forms to achieve his ends. The imagery is soft and dreamlike, feathers glinting in moonlight, flowing hair of a mare racing across plains, scales of a fish shimmering under starlit waters. Each transformation is described in a slow, meditative rhythm, allowing the listener to drift through Loki's world of constant change without tension or alarm. The section also touches on Loki's encounters with mortals. While often indirect, his influence shapes human experiences, bringing lessons in cunning, adaptation, and consequence. The narration frames these interactions gently, highlighting the subtle ways his cleverness influences outcomes. A whispered word inspiring a poet, a minor deception teaching caution, a sudden insight emerging from a seemingly chaotic event. The listener is encouraged to reflect on the quiet moral and symbolic lessons embedded in these stories. The storytelling then transitions to Loki's adventures that intersect with major gods' quests. Perhaps he aids in retrieving lost objects, navigating realms, or outsmarting adversaries. The narration emphasizes rhythm and imagery over tension. Landscapes drift past slowly. Encounters unfold with calm deliberation, and Loki's would illuminate solutions like flickers of light in shadowed halls. The focus is on observing the flow of events and the patterns of consequence, maintaining a soothing and immersive tone. The outline explores Loki's personality through these stories. Mischief is not merely for amusement. It is an expression of curiosity, intelligence, and adaptability. The narration reflects on his complex character, showing that even in chaos there is creativity and purpose. The listener is invited to meditate on the layers of Loki's actions, perceiving the subtle ways cunning interacts with morality, consequence, and cosmic rhythm. The section gently foreshadows the ultimate outcomes of his actions. Though many adventures are playful or clever, they ripple outward, affecting gods, mortals, and the course of events leading toward Ragnarok. The narration presents this with calm inevitability, like leaves drifting downstream. Each action contributes to a larger flow of mythic consequences. The tone remains meditative, emphasizing observation rather than tension or fear. The section closes with a reflective image of Loki in motion, shifting forms gliding through starlit forests, mountains, and halls, a presence both disruptive and illuminating. His cleverness, mischief, and adaptability continue to shape the realms, leaving trails of stories, lessons, and reflection. The narration gently transitions toward the next section, which will explore Loki's archetypal significance, his symbolic meaning, and why his myth continues to resonate in modern imagination. This section opens by inviting the listener into a reflective, almost meditative space, emphasizing Loki not just as a character in stories, but as an archetype that resonates through human imagination. The narration describes twilight landscapes, drifting fog over quiet forests, and rivers flowing gently under starlight, providing a soft backdrop for contemplating the deeper meanings of myth. Loki is presented as a figure that exists beyond time, a symbol of cunning, change, and the unpredictable forces that shape life. The narration begins by exploring Loki as the archetype of the trickster. The outline emphasizes his qualities: intelligence, adaptability, cunning, and mischief. Unlike destructive villains, the trickster archetype challenges norms, exposes hidden truths, and navigates liminal spaces between order and chaos. The storytelling is soft and immersive, allowing the listener to envision Loki's actions as subtle ripples in the fabric of the world, like shadows moving across a calm landscape, influencing events in quiet yet profound ways. Next, the section explores Loki's symbolic role in myth. He embodies the tension between creation and destruction, demonstrating that chaos is often intertwined with growth and transformation. The narration frames this gently: a forest fire clearing space for new life, a river altering its course to nourish unseen lands, and storms passing to reveal calm skies. Loki's mischief and cunning are portrayed as forces that challenge complacency and inspire adaptation, encouraging listeners to reflect on the subtle interplay between unpredictability and order. The outline also examines the duality of Loki's nature. He is neither wholly benevolent nor entirely malevolent, but a complex figure whose actions can lead to both problem and solution. The narration emphasizes calm reflection, encouraging the listener to meditate on how contradictions coexist, wisdom emerging from chaos, insight born of deception, and balance maintained through disruption. This duality makes Loki a compelling archetype, a mirror for understanding human behavior and the unpredictable currents of life. The narration then considers Loki's role in cultural and psychological symbolism. Across myths and literature, he represents the challenges that arise when boundaries are tested, the creativity that emerges from risk, and the necessity of cunning in navigating uncertainty. The storytelling uses gentle, evocative imagery, shifting shadows, flowing streams, and wind-bending branches, allowing the listener to see Loki's archetypal presence as a natural and calming force that teaches reflection, awareness, and adaptability. The section explores Loki's function in narrative structure. He catalyzes change, initiates consequences, and forces other characters to act and grow. The narration frames these moments softly, emphasizing patterns and rhythms rather than dramatic conflict. A gentle push that redirects a river, a quiet whisper that prompts thought, or a subtle transformation that opens new possibilities. Loki's mischief is a tool for narrative balance, guiding events and revealing hidden truths while maintaining the calm, immersive tone of the story. The outline also examines Loki's connection to human psychology. He embodies curiosity, intellect, and the ability to navigate ambiguity, traits that resonate deeply in storytelling and personal reflection. The narration encourages listeners to consider how Loki's traits mirror their own experiences with uncertainty, cleverness, and adaptability. By presenting these reflections in a soft, contemplative tone, the section creates a meditative space for exploring the resonance of archetypes in everyday life. Next, the narration touches on Loki's symbolic legacy in the modern world. His archetype appears in literature, film, and folklore, demonstrating the timeless appeal of the trickster figure. The storytelling emphasizes calm observation, showing how Loki's characteristics, cunning, shape-shifting, clever mischief, continue to inspire creativity, provoke thought, and challenge assumptions. The listener is invited to drift gently through these connections, seeing the continuity of archetypal influence across cultures and time. The section reflects on Loki as a symbol of transformation. Change, growth, and adaptation are central to his narrative presence, and the myths encourage reflection on how disruption can lead to insight and renewal. The narration uses soft imagery: autumn leaves falling and nourishing soil, waves reshaping a shoreline, or stars shifting slowly across the night sky. Loki's influence is portrayed as subtle yet profound, a guiding reminder that even chaos carries purpose and meaning. The section closes with a contemplative image of Loki moving through the 9 realms, shifting forms and roles, leaving trails of wisdom, mischief, and consequence in his wake. The narration emphasizes calm reflection, encouraging the listener to absorb the symbolic significance of his character, recognizing the balance of chaos and order, intelligence and cunning, playfulness and consequence. This gentle meditation prepares the listener for the final sections, which will tie together the narratives and reflections on Loki, leading to a serene conclusion and restfulness. This section opens by inviting the listener into a reflective, almost meditative space. The narration emphasizes calm imagery: twilight drifting over Asgard, leaves rustling gently in northern forests, rivers flowing slowly beneath a silver moon. Loki's presence is evoked subtly as a guiding thread through these reflections, reminding the audience that even mischief and chaos have meaning and consequence. The tone encourages gentle contemplation rather than dramatic tension. The narration begins by exploring the lessons embedded in Loki's stories. One central theme is the balance between chaos and order. Loki disrupts patterns, creates unexpected challenges, and tests the gods' abilities to adapt. Yet these disruptions often lead to growth, innovation, and transformation. The listener is encouraged to reflect on how life itself mirrors this dynamic. Obstacles and surprises can catalyze creativity, resilience, and insight. The storytelling remains soft and immersive, allowing each lesson to sink in gently. The section highlights the value of cleverness and adaptability. Loki's intelligence allows him to navigate situations that brute force or conventional methods cannot. The narration emphasizes calm observation of his strategies, clever solutions, careful planning, and quick thinking. These traits are presented as contemplative reflections, inviting the listener to appreciate problem-solving, resourcefulness, and the subtle ways cunning can be constructive. Loki's wit is framed as a quiet, enduring force, not a source of tension. The outline also reflects on responsibility and consequence. Though Loki's actions are often playful or mischievous, they carry repercussions. The narration gently explores how myths illustrate the importance of understanding the impact of one's choices. The listener is invited to meditate on the subtle moral currents of Loki's tales, recognizing that even actions born of curiosity or cleverness can have significant effects. This reflection is framed with soft imagery: ripples on a calm pond, branches bending in the wind, the slow turning of day into night. Next, the narration considers the duality of change. Loki embodies transformation and unpredictability, showing that chaos and order are not opposing forces, but complementary elements of the cosmos. The storytelling emphasizes this balance with gentle, dreamlike descriptions, shifting tides reshaping shores, clouds drifting across the sky, forests slowly growing and decaying. The audience is encouraged to see that disruption is not inherently negative, but part of the natural rhythm of life and myth. The section then explores the theme of curiosity and exploration. Loki's mischief often arises from questioning, experimenting, and testing limits. The narration frames this as a contemplative lesson. Curiosity, when tempered with awareness, can lead to discovery, innovation, and growth. The listener is encouraged to reflect on their own experiences with curiosity, seeing value in exploring boundaries and embracing uncertainty in thoughtful ways. The tone remains soft, immersive, and bedtime-friendly. The outline emphasizes adaptability and resilience. Loki's stories demonstrate how cleverness and flexibility allow one to navigate unpredictable circumstances. The narration uses gentle imagery, a bird adjusting its flight in shifting winds, a river bending around rocks, a fire flickering but not extinguished. These examples parallel Loki's ability to respond to challenges creatively, illustrating the value of mental agility and calm problem-solving in myth and in life. The narration then touches on empathy and perspective. While Loki often acts selfishly or provocatively, his actions also reveal the vulnerabilities, strengths, and limitations of others. The storytelling encourages reflection on understanding different perspectives, recognizing that even disruptive forces can illuminate truths or reveal hidden potentials. The imagery is soft and meditative. Glimpses of sunlight through clouds, shadows dancing lightly across the ground, distant sounds of animals stirring quietly in forests. The section gently considers the inevitability of cycles. Loki's stories, from mischief to punishment to pivotal events in Ragnarok, demonstrate recurring patterns of cause and effect, challenge and resolution. The narration frames these cycles in a calm, contemplative way. The rising and setting of the sun, the flow of rivers, the turning of seasons. Listeners are encouraged to see life and myth as intertwined, with chaos and order coexisting in harmonious rhythm. The section closes with a reflective, calming image, Loki moving through realms as a subtle force, shaping events, teaching lessons, and illustrating the interplay between unpredictability and purpose. The narration emphasizes meditative reflection on the balance of chaos and order, intelligence and consequence, curiosity and responsibility. The listener is left with a sense of gentle contemplation, preparing for the final section, which will conclude the story with a soft, immersive summary and restful closure. This final section opens with a gentle transition from the stories and lessons of Loki to a calming, reflective closure. The narration encourages the listener to imagine twilight descending over the 9 realms, soft light fading, rivers gliding silently through forests, and stars slowly appearing in the northern sky. The imagery is dreamlike and immersive, inviting the audience to rest in a quiet, contemplative space. The tone is soothing, meditative, and slow-paced, perfect for a bedtime-style narration. The narration begins by summarizing the journey through Loki's myth, from his earliest acts of cleverness and mischief to the dramatic consequences of Baldur's death, his capture and punishment, his children, and finally his pivotal role in Ragnarok. The outline emphasizes calm pacing, gently revisiting key events without urgency or tension. Each story is framed as part of a larger, flowing narrative, illustrating the continuity of Loki's influence and the interconnectedness of myths across time. The section reflects on Loki's complex nature. He is a figure of intelligence, cunning, mischief, and transformation, embodying both the light and shadow inherent in life and myth. The narration encourages the listener to meditate on this duality, that cleverness can bring both joy and disruption, that chaos can catalyze growth, and that even unpredictable forces have a place within the natural order. This reflection is soft, using imagery like sunlight filtering through mist. leaves trembling gently in the breeze, and distant mountains bathed in fading light. The outline then gently revisits the symbolic lessons of Loki's stories. Curiosity, adaptability, creativity, and the interplay between cause and consequence are highlighted. The narration frames these lessons as quiet reflections rather than moral directives, allowing the listener to absorb them slowly, like drifting on calm waters. The emphasis is on meditation and understanding rather than urgency or tension, reinforcing the soothing, bedtime-style tone. Next, the narration reflects on the enduring resonance of Loki's archetype. His role as the trickster, the agent of change, and the embodiment of duality continues to inspire storytelling, reflection, and imagination. The section emphasizes calm observation. Loki's influence flows across myths, literature, and culture, much like a river winding through varied landscapes, shaping the land gently yet persistently. The listener is encouraged to consider the timelessness of these stories and their capacity to evoke contemplation and insight. The section then meditates on the themes of balance and cycles, chaos and order, mischief and consequence, life and transformation. All are part of the natural rhythm that Loki exemplifies. The narration uses soft, immersive imagery, tides rising and falling, clouds drifting across twilight skies, and the slow turning of seasons. The audience is invited to feel these cycles in their imagination, recognizing the peaceful inevitability and interconnection of events in both myth and life. The outline includes a reflection on personal resonance. Listeners are encouraged to consider how Loki's traits, curiosity, cleverness, adaptability, might mirror aspects of their own experience. The narration is gentle and contemplative, using metaphors such as stars reflecting in still waters or a soft breeze guiding leaves along a quiet path. This allows the audience to connect with the stories on an intimate, reflective level without pressure or drama. Next, the narration emphasizes rest and closure. After traversing the full scope of Loki's stories, the listener is invited to release the mind from active engagement, letting the images, lessons, and reflections settle like sediment in a calm river. Soft auditory cues are implied, the whisper of wind, distant waves, quiet rustling of trees, to reinforce relaxation and readiness for sleep. The storytelling maintains immersive detail without creating tension, ensuring a restful cadence. The section then offers a final meditation on Loki's enduring mystery and charm. Though his actions are often unpredictable, mischievous, and complex, they are integral to the rhythm of myth and the unfolding of stories. The narration frames this with soft imagery, twilight spreading across the 9 realms, stars shimmering like gentle sparks, and Loki's presence drifting like a shadow among the realms. The listener is invited to rest in the balance of complexity and calm, observing without judgment, and letting curiosity and wonder linger gently. Finally, the narration closes with a sense of peaceful finality. Loki's stories, mischiefs, and lessons are left to drift through imagination like floating clouds or gentle currents. The listener is encouraged to exhale, release tension, and allow the mind to rest, carrying the gentle reflections and mythic imagery into sleep. The last images are quiet and soothing, a golden twilight fading into night, stars glowing softly, and the serene presence of Loki lingering as a reminder of curiosity, cleverness, and the subtle beauty of myth. This final section begins with a soft, dreamlike panorama of the 9 realms at rest. The narration paints a gentle twilight, forests draped in silver mist, rivers gliding silently beneath a star-speckled sky, mountains softened by dusk, and the faint glimmer of distant aurora borealis stretching across the horizon. The imagery is immersive and calm, encouraging the listener to drift into the final moments of reflection. Loki's presence is suggested as a subtle current weaving through these landscapes, a reminder that his stories persist quietly, like echoes across time. The narration reflects on the totality of Loki's mythic journey, drawing together threads from previous sections. From playful mischief to cosmic disruption, cleverness that both creates and challenges, and the profound consequences of his actions, Loki's narrative is framed as a continuous, flowing story. The outline emphasizes gentle pacing, The listener is guided through these memories slowly, like retracing footsteps through a soft, moonlit forest, observing details of light, shadow, and movement without urgency or tension. The section meditates on the lingering lessons of Loki. His stories illustrate that curiosity, intelligence, and adaptability are powerful tools, yet they carry responsibility and consequence. Chaos, while unsettling, can spark creativity and transformation. The narration presents these reflections in calming metaphors, ripples expanding outward on still water, autumn leaves drifting slowly to the ground, a quiet breeze reshaping dunes. Listeners are encouraged to absorb these truths like soft, flowing knowledge settling into consciousness. The outline then emphasizes Loki's symbolic immortality. Though the events of myths occur in distant realms and long ago, his archetype endures. Tricksters, shapeshifters, agents of change, and clever disruptors continue to appear in stories, literature, and imagination worldwide. The narration highlights this enduring resonance in a gentle, contemplative tone. Loki's essence is less a character frozen in time and more a force of transformation, weaving through culture, consciousness, and reflection, quietly shaping understanding across generations. Next, the narration gently revisits Loki's dual nature. He embodies both disruption and illumination, mischief and wisdom, shadow and spark. The audience is encouraged to reflect on this duality, recognizing parallels in their own experiences of complexity and unpredictability. The imagery is soft and meditative, moonlight shimmering on still water, clouds drifting slowly across a starry sky, faint ripples in a quiet pond. These images reinforce the balance between light and shadow, chaos and calm, central to Loki's stories. The section then moves into a reflective meditation on cycles and renewal. Loki's myths, including Ragnarok, the stories of his children, and his endless adventures, demonstrate that endings are not final but part of natural rhythms. The narration uses soothing imagery, rivers eroding shores and creating fertile banks, forests shedding leaves to grow anew, the rise and fall of tides. Listeners are invited to internalize this sense of continuity, finding calm and reassurance in the perpetual ebb and flow of change. The outline explores the theme of connection. Loki's stories tie gods, mortals, and the natural world together in interwoven patterns of cause, consequence, and reflection. The narration frames these links gently. A bird's flight connecting distant lands, the whisper of wind carrying seeds to new soil, or a stone rolling slowly down a mountainside, shaping the earth below. The audience is encouraged to sense the subtle, persistent influence of Loki, not as a source of chaos alone, but as a reminder of interconnectedness and the quiet ways action ripples through time. The narration then emphasizes rest, closure, and reflection. Listeners are invited to exhale and release any lingering tension, letting Loki's stories settle like soft, golden light across the mind. The imagery evokes calm, twilight deepening, stars appearing more fully, northern lights fading gently, and the slow breathing of a vast, peaceful landscape. The storytelling encourages the audience to remain immersed in reflection, feeling the soft impact of myth and story as a source of comfort and contemplation. Next, the section touches on imagination and dreaming. Loki's world, like dreams, allows exploration of curiosity, transformation, and the unexpected. The narration softly encourages listeners to drift further into their own imagination, envisioning the realms, characters, and lessons of Loki as gentle companions in the mind. The imagery is ethereal, shimmering auroras, quiet forests lit by fireflies, distant mountains fading into clouds. The tone remains serene, immersive, and conducive to sleep. Finally, the section concludes with a lasting, lullaby-like reflection. Loki, ever present, continues to move through stories and imagination, reminding us of the beauty of cleverness, curiosity, and the interplay of chaos and order. The narration leaves the listener with a sense of quiet completeness, the nine realms resting, the echoes of adventures fading gently into memory, and a calm, reflective awareness of the lessons, stories, and imagery they have absorbed. The last visual is of Loki as a soft, drifting presence in the twilight, a subtle guide for contemplation and restful slumber.